In the shifting emotional landscape of the bold and the beautiful, where truth is often disguised as illusion and danger rarely announces itself with clarity, the upcoming episodes promise not an explosion of predictable chaos, but something far more unsettling, a mystery that unfolds quietly, almost invisibly, until it is too late to contain. At the center of this unfolding tension stands Sheila Carter, a woman whose past has made her synonymous with danger, yet whose present seems to challenge everything the world believes about her. The question is no longer whether Sheila is capable of destruction, but whether she is being pushed toward it, or perhaps, more disturbingly, whether someone else is preparing to use her reputation as a weapon. The initial setup of this storyline plays deliberately with expectation, almost manipulating the audience into anticipating the worst. The image is striking. Sheila in a confined space with Taylor Hayes, tension thick enough to suffocate, the implication of violence hanging in the air like an inevitable storm. For a moment, it feels as though history is repeating itself, that Sheila is about to revert to the version of herself that has defined her for years. But then, in a subtle yet powerful shift, that expectation is dismantled. The supposed weapon is nothing more than a pizza cutter, the perceived threat dissolving into something almost mundane. This moment is not played for humor, but for contrast. It forces the audience to confront how deeply ingrained their assumptions about Sheila have become and how easily those assumptions can distort reality. This does not mean that Sheila is calm or that her emotions are any less intense. On the contrary, her anger is palpable, fueled by the betrayal she has experienced at the hands of Deacon Sharp. Yet what makes this moment significant is not the anger itself, but the way she chooses to handle it. Sheila does not lash out violently, does not allow her rage to dictate her actions in the way it once might have. Instead, she contains it, channels it into words, into a confrontation that is emotionally charged but ultimately controlled. The worst Deacon faces is the possibility of a slap, a physical manifestation of emotional pain rather than a descent into chaos. And even that moment, if it comes, feels less like an act of aggression and more like a release, a boundary drawn after a line has been crossed too many times. In choosing restraint, Sheila does something that is both extraordinary and deeply fragile. She steps away. She acknowledges, however painfully, that Deacon's love for Taylor is real and that no amount of pleading or anger will change that truth. Her decision to leave is not an act of defeat, but a moment of self-preservation, a refusal to become the person everyone expects her to be. Yet this decision exists on unstable ground. Walking away requires strength, but maintaining that distance, especially when confronted with the reality of Deacon and Taylor's new relationship, requires something even more difficult: sustained emotional control in the face of ongoing pain. As the narrative shifts toward April 10th, the tension takes on a new form, one that is quieter but far more ominous. Deacon, having closed the chapter with Sheila, moves toward Taylor with a sense of clarity that borders on relief. Their connection, once constrained by secrecy and guilt, is now free to exist in the open. They begin to imagine a future together, to explore what it means to build something stable after so much emotional turbulence. Yet even in these moments of intimacy, there is an underlying vulnerability that neither fully acknowledges. They are so focused on each other, so consumed by the promise of a new beginning, that they fail to recognize the subtle signs that something is not quite right. The revelation that someone is watching them introduces a new layer of suspense that transforms the entire narrative. It is not the act of being observed that is most unsettling, but the ambiguity surrounding the observer's identity. The most obvious suspect is Sheila. After all, her emotional connection to Deacon, her history of obsession, and her current state of heartbreak make her a logical candidate. And yet, the deliberate omission of her name in the spoilers suggests something more complex. If Sheila were truly the one watching, why maintain the mystery? Why not confirm what everyone already expects? This question opens the door to a far more intriguing possibility, that the real threat lies elsewhere, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to emerge. The idea that someone else could be watching Deacon and Taylor, someone with motives that remain unclear, shifts the narrative from a story about emotional fallout to one of calculated danger. It introduces the possibility that Sheila, for once, may not be the source of chaos, but rather its unintended scapegoat. Such a development would not only redefine Sheila's role within the story, but also challenge the perceptions of every character around her. If something were to happen to Deacon or Taylor, if harm were to come to them under mysterious circumstances, there's little doubt that suspicion would fall immediately on Sheila. Her past would overshadow her present, her efforts to change dismissed in favor of a narrative that is easier to accept. In this scenario, Sheila becomes both victim and suspect, trapped in a situation where her innocence is almost impossible to prove because of who she used to be. The potential involvement of Luna Nozawa adds another layer of complexity to this unfolding mystery. If Luna were somehow still alive, operating from the shadows, her motivations could be deeply personal, rooted in a desire for revenge that extends beyond simple retribution. Her actions, while directed at Deacon or Taylor, could inadvertently implicate Sheila, creating a web of deception that is as dangerous as it is intricate. This possibility transforms the narrative into something far more unpredictable, where every action carries consequences that ripple outward in unexpected ways. At the same time, the story leaves room for another possibility, one that reaches into the pasts of both Deacon and Taylor. In a world where history is never truly buried, it is entirely plausible that someone from their past could resurface, driven by unresolved grievances or long-suppressed anger. Such a character would not only bring a new dimension of conflict, but also force Deacon and Taylor to confront aspects of themselves they may have hoped to leave behind. Their relationship, already under strain from external pressures, will be tested further by the reemergence of secrets that refuse to stay hidden. Throughout all of this, Sheila remains the emotional and thematic anchor of the story. Her journey is not defined solely by what happens around her, but by how she responds to it. The choice she made, to walk away, to resist the pull of her darker instincts, is now being tested in ways she could not have anticipated. If she is blamed for something she did not do, if her attempts at change are met with suspicion and hostility, the temptation to abandon that path may become overwhelming. And yet, if she holds on, if she continues to resist the narrative imposed upon her, she has the potential to redefine not only her own identity, but the way others perceive her. The brilliance of this storyline lies in its refusal to offer easy answers. It does not ask whether Sheila is good or bad, whether Deacon and Taylor deserve happiness, or whether the threat is real or imagined. Instead, it presents a series of possibilities, each more unsettling than the last, and allows the tension to build organically. The mystery of the unseen observer becomes a symbol of something larger, the idea that danger is not always where it is expected to be, and that the greatest threats often emerge from the spaces we fail to notice. As the story continues to unfold, the question is not simply what will happen next, but how each character will respond when the truth finally comes to light. Will Sheila remain on the path she has chosen, even when it becomes increasingly difficult to do so? Will Deacon and Taylor recognize the danger before it is too late, or will their focus on each other blind them to the risks surrounding them? And perhaps most importantly, who is truly watching from the shadows, and what do they stand to gain from the chaos that is about to unfold? In this world, where perception often outweighs reality and past actions cast long, inescapable shadows, the answers are never simple. But one thing is certain: the calm that now surrounds these characters is not a resolution. It is a pause, a fragile moment of stillness before something far more consequential begins to take shape, threatening to unravel everything they believe they have just managed to rebuild. In a world where emotions simmer beneath polished surfaces and truths rarely reveal themselves without consequence, the episode of The Bold and the Beautiful airing on Thursday, April 9th, 2026, unfolds not as a simple continuation of ongoing drama, but as a deeply layered emotional reckoning where loyalty, betrayal, and identity collide with unsettling force. The narrative does not rely on spectacle to capture attention. Instead, it draws viewers into the quiet devastation that follows when characters are forced to confront not only what has been done to them, but what they themselves have become in the process. At the center of this unraveling stands Hope Logan Spencer, whose decision to defend her father is less about blind allegiance and more about an internal compass shaped by years of witnessing the fragile nature of redemption. Hope's role in this episode carries a weight that extends far beyond a simple act of support. By providing Deacon with an alibi tied to his secret encounter with Taylor Hayes, she inadvertently positions herself at the heart of a moral storm. Her actions challenge the rigid narratives imposed by others, particularly Ridge and Steffi, who see the situation in stark, unforgiving terms. For them, Sheila remains an ever-present threat, and Deacon's choices are viewed through the lens of irresponsibility and danger. Yet Hope refuses to accept such a binary perspective. She understands the fear, she recognizes the risk, but she also sees something else, something deeply human in her father's attempt to move forward, even if that attempt is flawed. Her defense becomes a statement not just about Deacon, but about the possibility that people can exist in the gray areas between right and wrong without being wholly defined by their past. While Hope stands firm in her convictions, the emotional core of the episode unfolds in a far more intimate and volatile space between Sheila Carter and Deacon Sharp. Their confrontation is not marked by explosive violence, but by something far more unsettling, a raw, unfiltered honesty that strips away the illusions both have clung to. Sheila's anger is immediate and justified, fueled by the realization that Deacon's involvement with Taylor Hayes was not a fleeting mistake, but a reflection of deeper emotional betrayal. Yet what defines this moment is not the anger itself, but the way Sheila chooses to process it. She allows herself to feel the pain fully, to articulate the depth of her hurt, and in doing so reveals a vulnerability that stands in stark contrast to the image that has long defined her in the eyes of others. This vulnerability, however, does not erase the tension that surrounds her. Sheila's insistence that she has changed, that she will not act in ways she will later regret, is both reassuring and deeply unsettling. It forces those around her, and the audience, to confront a difficult question. Can someone so deeply rooted in chaos truly redefine themselves, or is this restraint merely temporary, a fragile facade waiting to crack under pressure? Her refusal to resort to violence, her determination to avoid returning to prison, signals a conscious effort to break free from the cycle that has defined her life. Yet the sincerity of that effort remains under scrutiny, not only from others but from within herself. Change, for Sheila, is not a destination but a constant struggle, one that becomes infinitely more difficult in the face of profound emotional loss. Deacon, in contrast, emerges as a figure caught between intention and consequence. His admission of the affair is not accompanied by defensiveness, but by a quiet acceptance of the damage he has caused. What complicates his position is the undeniable truth that his feelings for Taylor are real, that his desire to build a future with her is not rooted in impulse, but in a genuine belief that he can become a better version of himself within that relationship. Yet this pursuit of a new beginning comes at a cost that cannot be ignored. His treatment of Sheila, particularly his apparent inability to see her as anything other than the person she once was, reveals a cruelty that undermines his claim to moral growth. In trying to escape one version of himself, Deacon risks becoming another kind of villain, one whose actions are justified in his own mind but devastating to those left behind. The emotional complexity of this dynamic is further amplified by the broader reactions of those connected to it. Ridge Forrester embodies a perspective rooted in fear and experience, his anger driven by a belief that any proximity to Sheila inevitably leads to danger. His concern for his family, particularly for Steffy Forrester Finnegan, transforms his skepticism into something more aggressive, more confrontational. He does not see nuance in the situation. He sees a threat that must be neutralized. This rigid stance places him in direct opposition to Hope, whose willingness to acknowledge complexity is perceived not as strength but as recklessness. Steffy, aligned closely with Ridge, carries her own burden of fear and frustration. Her past experiences with Sheila have left scars that cannot be easily dismissed, shaping her perception of every action Sheila takes. To her, the idea that Sheila might simply walk away, that she might choose restraint over retaliation, is not just unlikely, it is impossible. This belief fuels her anger not only toward Sheila, but toward anyone who appears to underestimate the danger, including Hope and even Taylor. The resulting tension between these characters is not merely interpersonal. It reflects deeper ideological divides about trust, forgiveness, and the limits of change. Amid this web of conflict, Sheila's internal journey becomes the most unpredictable and potentially transformative element of the narrative. Standing at a crossroads, she is faced with a choice that will define not only her future, but the trajectory of everyone around her. If she continues to be treated as a monster, if her attempts at change are dismissed and invalidated, the risk of her reverting to destructive behavior becomes increasingly real. Yet if she finds even a single source of support, a reason to believe that her efforts are seen and valued, she may be able to navigate this moment without succumbing to the impulses that have defined her past. This duality, the potential for both growth and regression, creates a tension that lingers beneath every scene, shaping the atmosphere of uncertainty that permeates the episode. Beyond the central conflict, the narrative expands to include other storylines that echo and reinforce its themes. Characters like Malcolm and Stephanie reflect on their past, their memories serving as a reminder that relationships are often shaped as much by history as by present choices. Claire's shifting perception of Holden introduces another layer of emotional complexity, illustrating how easily perspectives can change when new truths come to light. Meanwhile, Lily's decision to seek guidance from Tracy underscores the importance of external support in navigating internal turmoil. Each of these threads, while distinct, contributes to a broader exploration of how secrets, revelations, and emotional vulnerability influence the way people connect with one another. As the episode unfolds, the question of who truly bears responsibility becomes increasingly difficult to answer. Is Sheila still the villain, defined by her past actions and the fear she inspires? Or has Deacon, through his manipulation and emotional dishonesty, taken on a role that is equally destructive, if not more so in its subtlety? The narrative refuses to provide a clear answer, instead inviting viewers to sit with the discomfort of ambiguity. It challenges the audience to look beyond surface-level judgments and consider the deeper motivations and consequences that shape each character's behavior. Looking ahead, the uncertainty surrounding Sheila's next move becomes the driving force of the story. Will she continue on the path she claims to have chosen, embracing restraint and seeking a new identity? Or will the weight of betrayal and isolation push her toward a different kind of retaliation, one that may not involve physical violence, but could be just as damaging in its impact? The possibility of her targeting Taylor through professional channels, questioning her ethics and credibility, introduces a new dimension of conflict that aligns with her promise to avoid direct harm while still asserting control. At the same time, Deacon and Taylor's relationship, now free from the constraints that once held it back, faces its own set of challenges. Their connection, while genuine, is built on a foundation that is anything but stable. The scrutiny of those around them, the lingering presence of Sheila, and the unresolved tensions within their own hearts all contribute to a sense that their happiness, while real, is far from secure. Their journey forward will require not only emotional commitment, but a willingness to confront the consequences of the choices that brought them together. In the end, this episode does not offer resolution so much as it deepens the questions at the heart of the narrative. It explores what it means to change, to forgive, to move forward in a world where the past is never truly left behind. It asks whether redemption is something that can be claimed or whether it must be granted by others, and what happens when that validation is withheld. And as each character continues to navigate the shifting landscape of their relationships, the story moves forward with a quiet, relentless intensity, reminding us that in this world, the most profound transformations are often the ones that unfold in silence. In the spaces where hope and fear exist side by side, shaping the